The Democratic Alliance in eThekwini held what it calls the real state of the city address today, ahead of the Executive Mayor Mxolisi Kaunda's official address, which is happening tomorrow. KwaZulu-Natal's only metro municipality is experiencing poor services, including water shortages, persistent power cuts, uncollected refuse, and piling municipal debt. Joining us now to brief us on the real state of what they call the city address is KwaZulu-Natal DA Premier candidate Chris Pappas. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. What we are likely to hear, of course, is that in the 30 years of democracy, we pride ourselves on having succeeded in transforming the lives of millions of people by delivering quality basic services like water and electricity, and numbers will be given to us of households that have access to at least basic levels of water at 83%, household access to at least basic level of sanitation, 74%, over 90% of households with access to basic electricity, over 1.1 million households with access to basic level of solid waste removal, and so on and so forth. So these are things that generally will come from the state of the city address. But if you just look at over the last year, which was called the year of decisive action, where the leadership of eThekwini recommitted itself to double efforts to change the lives of the people. Is there clear evidence that that mandate was followed by this administration?
It sounds like you're delivering the address of Mayor Kaunda yourself. Are you sure you haven't read his speech already?
It's likely going to sound something like that.
Yeah, I was waiting for the question, but you gave the speech, so I'm not quite sure. No, you know what? We can never lie to ourselves and say that between 1994 and today we haven't seen a mass rollout of services. But I think what we've also seen is an incredible decline in the quality of services, the efficiency and the effectiveness, as well as the reliability of services. So it's one thing to say, we've electrified, and that's a key word, we've electrified 83% of households. But how many of those households receive a consistent supply of electricity? How long does it take to turn around electricity faults? Especially when you're talking about a metro, 60% of the provincial economy. How long does it take for water to be returned to taps? How long do businesses go without water? So, numbers can be a very, very deceiving thing. What you look at when you're trying to run a city, when you're trying to run an effective, efficient, a reliable economy where people can invest in, is the reliability of those services. And I think that's what we're lacking in eThekwini. For many months, possibly even years now, we've seen an incredible decline in the reliability of services. Weeks, days, there's parts of Verulam 300 days without water, and Uzuma plates that have been without water for 7 years, sewage leaks that have been ongoing for months and months. These are all the negative things that we know exist. Yeah. So it's one thing to talk about the stats of how well you think you're doing, but the reality is that the city is falling apart, and the reliability of services is no longer something that people can actually believe is true.
A decline in reliability of services, to what would you attribute that? Is it officials abdicating their responsibility? Is it tight budgets? Is it budget cuts? What's actually happening, especially if you consider, I'm sure it's something that you do yourself, review the performance of the service delivery units within the municipality?
Absolutely. So the first thing is accountability. Accountability for political leadership and accountability for administrative leadership. Now, I was a councillor in the city of eThekwini in 2016. Many of the senior managers, many of the deputy city managers, and even the municipal manager who was a deputy city manager at the time, all still hold their jobs. All of them have got pay increases. Some of them have got pay bonuses over the years. But despite that, you see a rollback and a decline in the quality of services. So how can you reward people? How can you continue to have people on when the city itself is failing? If you had a business or any other private business out there had the same level of decline as we see in eThekwini, people would have lost their jobs. And I'm not talking about general workers. I'm not talking about the people who are at the coalface of service delivery, who are even struggling without gloves and without black plastic bags. I'm talking about the managers who earn multi-million rand salaries. But the managers are one side of it. You have to have political willpower. You have to have political vision. You have to have political backbone to be able to deal with these sorts of problems. And we're lacking there. And I think, an added layer to that is the provincial government. our laws are quite clear in terms of when a provincial government steps in, what their roles are, and what they're supposed to do if a local government, which eThekwini is, fails. So eThekwini is failing by a large scale. You know, they have large budgets so they can put plasters on things here or there. But at the end of the day, they're failing, and the provincial government has a mandate. Currently, they claim that they're under a Section 154 administration, which is a financial administration. It's a treasury administration. But that's never been presented to council, which means that it doesn't exist. The premier, we had to force her in the legislature to agree that there was this that exists. But a serious provincial government would put this municipality under a Section 136 administration, which means that they're failing to deliver on the executive mandate. In this instance, it's particularly water, sanitation, and electricity. And those are the key components that we need for our municipality to run.
So, I mean, if you go by the previous State of the City address, they would tell you, for example, in one of the key delivery units, which is the Durban Cleansing and Solid Waste Management, they've appointed, that in itself, for me, would be a challenge, another acting head who brought a renewed focus. The fact that the head is acting is a problem. They're saying this came after a concern about the poor state of waste management in the city. The renewed focus at the solid waste management unit is a clear demonstration that we fully understand the responsibility of living up to our constitutional mandate. Do they understand the responsibility? Did it make any difference?
Listen, I've got speech writers and I've got communication staff in my municipality, and this sounds exactly like what they are paid to do. Look up, nice keywords to put in a speech, but at the end of the day, nothing has changed. There are vehicles that sit that are not working. The workshop is not working. There are vehicles that were purchased that sit in storage at the moment. There's huge unhappiness amongst the staff because they don't have tools of trade, whether it's black plastic bags, gloves, whatever it might be. So the reality is very different to what the politicians in the head of the city say. The reality on the ground is that the city is dirty. The city is not collecting waste as it is supposed to. Now, again, this comes down to basic management. And I often say that if you can't pick up the rubbish, if you can't pick up the plastic that's on the ground, then how can you ever implement major projects around infrastructure or whatever it might be? So yeah, you can reflect back, and we can use fancy words to say that there's a renewed energy and a renewed vigor in servicing the city, but nothing has actually changed. There's no accountability. There's no performance management changes. The service delivery and budget implementation plan hasn't changed. The acting positions haven't changed. So we really need to look through the noise and actually see what the municipality is doing to achieve the targets that it's set for itself. And nothing has changed. Literally nothing has changed between the acting positions and those positions that are in government now. The budget hasn't changed. The contracts haven't changed. The staff haven't changed. Everything is the same.
So one of the targets that they set for themselves is something that maybe you might have not put it in so many words, but something that in conversations with you I've picked up is what you do. They speak of it as a resilient social solidarity economy. So the mayor says, look, we've realized that municipal services in parts of the metro don't necessarily all have to come from government, right? We can work with community-based organization, other non-governmental organization, other people with legal competence can come up with some kind of agreements to help us do this. So, for example, the tendering system doesn't always have to be the way in which we do it. Fixing potholes, fixing refuse collection, road markings, and so on and so forth. We can get people from communities to do this. Have they done that? Saying the legislation allows us to do that. Have they done it?
So Section 72, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the Systems Act provides you with the mechanisms in which you can deliver services in a municipality, whether it is the use of an external service provider, tender contractors, whether it is partnering with another agency of state, Eskom, Transnet, etc., or whether it is using non-profit organizations like the ones that you have mentioned. But really nothing has changed. We've seen under the leadership of Zandile Gumede, who used under the guise of empowerment the small business model, where it really wasn't thought out well. Contracts were awarded to people who didn't have the capacity. There was no training and development, and there was no contingency plans made for when there was a gap in the system. So the city was paying double. They were paying their workers, they were paying the contractors, and then they were having to pay, so triple. They were having to pay to clean up the mess. So there's a nobility. There's a great thought in the ability to use small businesses or NPOs, which government should be doing. We should be partnering for efficiency. We should be partnering for progress in municipalities. But what we've seen is that this is either abused or it is not fully understood and implemented. And that's really government's problem, is that we cannot implement. We have great ideas sometimes, and we can never implement because of either political interference, because there's an ulterior motive around the money that we use, or whatever the issue might be. But implementation becomes the problem. I want to give you a small example. So in the Mgeni municipality, we are partnering with NPOs and the private sector around things such as rehabilitating our CBD, around environmental programs, and around skills development, because we know that this sector is more efficient and they're actually more passionate than government is. Government is not passionate about these things. Government should be passionate around governance. And that's where we need to start breaking down the barriers and start creating efficiencies around how to use the current laws, not to put out more and more tenders, but actually to facilitate civic involvement through the mechanisms that I've told you about. But this is not happening at eThekwini. It's often abused and often skewed, or every now and again there's political interference to try and get the program to work in a certain direction away from its core objectives.
So there were 5 pillars that they were going to focus on, certainly in the last year, including jobs and skills. Let's look at jobs and skills and tell me what is your impression of these programs and whether they are in place or they are not. There's a collaboration that was put between state-owned enterprises such as Transnet, Sandrel, and PRASA to ensure that local beneficiaries from the major projects are actually incorporated. For example, Sandrel will invest 40 billion in the next 3 years for the N2 and the N3 upgrades. Operationalization of the enterprise supplier development to leverage on private sector funding for skills development and financing of SMMEs. They also said they will strengthen collaboration with institutions of higher learning, including IT-related institutions, to drive digital skills for the future. There's a Wi-Fi program that they've had in place. Currently, the city having 457, this was last year, with 1,313 hotspots, and looking to add at least 200 more sites and 500 hotspots.
So yeah, again, it's a lot of plans and a lot of talk. Firstly, the Sandrel, Transnet, PRASA type engagements. Those are not municipal entities. Those are not municipal initiatives. These are objectives that the national government has set themselves to either fix or revive certain programs that, regardless of whether or not the city gets involved, still exist. Now, you'll know that the calls from the city of Cape Town to evolve those sorts of competencies to the municipality, then a municipality could claim credit for being involved there. The enterprise development, in many cases, is nothing more than a guise for business mafias. And we've seen that. Projects come to a close. We've seen Go Durban has never opened. There's many of those. Where there's things to celebrate, we must celebrate. So you've seen the Chatsworth line reopen, the PRASA line from Chatsworth reopen. We must celebrate those sorts of things. But we must also not lose track of the fact that there's many, many small businesses that are suffering. I use one example. There was a 25 million rand project in 2018 for the skin traders market, which is in the lower Mbilo area. 25 million rand was spent in 2018, but the building was never opened. It was half demolished. There was some minor work done. It's got no roof, no electricity, no water, but 25 million rand was spent. So for the last 6 years, those traders have been working on the streets, working out of an abandoned building, essentially. But now the municipality is allocating another 10 million rand. So we mustn't lose track of what the actual the mandate is of the city and get caught up in N3 upgrades and PRASA upgrades and use that. I mean, we've seen the government use it often. They'll claim 2010 stadiums today as successes of what they've done. What we really need to see is the small business unit empower small businesses. We need to see the infrastructure of the municipality, not the N3, not the N2. I'm talking about the M roads, the ones that currently sit half built, without street lights, with potholes on them, fixed. We need to see the water and sanitation fixed so that businesses can work again. We need to see the sea, the beachfront clean. These are all municipal mandates. So where there are municipal mandates that we should be focusing on, that is where we should really be unpacking to understand whether or not there's a failure or a success of delivery.
Yeah. Let's look at the final issue of fighting crime and interventions there, certainly admitting that part of it will be with the national government at the SAPS level, but some of it really looking at what the Metro can do, like recruiting 400 Metro police annually, using technology to fight crime, using CCTV cameras in the CBD, rural areas and townships, facial recognition cameras at entry points like toll gates and so on and so forth, body cams on Metro officers, training of specialized units in collaboration with the SAPS, such as dog units, public order policing and so on and so forth, and the usage of drones to monitor and detect crime. Are these in place?
Yes, some of them are. Some of them are in place. Some of them are there theoretically. For example, the CCTV cameras exist. They look beautiful on the poles, but when you go to the control center, most of them don't work. When you talk about technology, you have new cars being purchased, but as soon as that car has a puncture, it sits in the workshop because it's not being repaired. There's no supply chain manager to fix it. The factionalism in the Metro Police, because of the political interference in the police, makes it largely dysfunctional to tackle large-scale crimes or prevention, that is. The expansion of the water mafia around tankers means that a lot of resources have moved away from preventing crime to actually protecting tankers. You find Metro Police who are supposed to be trained, they've now become security guards for tankers. So again, it's a lot of talk, but the reality is that you have to look at the numbers. Now, some of the biggest crimes or the police stations with the highest crimes exist within the eThekwini metro region, whether it's Inanda, Mxolisi, Newzroom, etc. And that is how you really tell whether or not these interventions are making a difference. I had the pleasure of engaging with informal traders today on the Durban beachfront, and right next to where they're trading is a Metro police station. And one of the ladies working there, Mrs. Ntuli, described the police who work there. She said they're only there to guard the cars. And this is what you're talking about, the recruits that the city are bringing in. So we have to differentiate between the real interventions and window dressing the problem. And our government is really good at that in KwaZulu-Natal. We'll employ 10,000 people who don't have the tools of trade, who don't have direction, who don't know what the program is, but will say we've got a program for whatever it might be. So yes, I must agree that Metro Police in some cases is doing their job, but for the most extent, there's a huge lack of crime prevention, specifically in those areas that are hotspots, whether it's the CBD or those areas that I've mentioned before. Yeah. And this is largely due to the factionalism that exists in Metro Police, but as well as the under-resourcing.
So if you were to give me one big reason why you would suggest putting this Metro under administration, what would that be? With all these moving parts, some working, some not working, including those that we have mentioned today, what exactly would you want to put the city under administration for?
So I want to use two things because they are interrelated. The first is performance management, and the second is accountability, because they are interlinked. Local government, which a metro is, has specific executive functions that they must deliver on. So there are the nice to haves, and those are usually the things that we are supplementing as local government, the national and provincial government do. And those are usually social programs, and those are usually the nice to have sort of things from a local government perspective. But the real issues that we're supposed to be dealing with are, number one, infrastructure. And in terms of the constitution, it's electricity, it's water, it is roads, it is street lights. Those are some of the main, stormwater and sanitation. Those are the main things that we should be dealing with. When you have your water that is not, you can't swim in it because it's so polluted. When you have the Human Rights Commission with multiple investigations, in fact, you have the Human Rights Commission pulling out of forums meant to deal with service delivery issues because they say they're not getting any feedback from the municipality. When you have senior managers who are sitting there who have received bonuses and new payments over the years and not being held accountable, then you know there's a problem. Yeah. So those are the two things. It's a failure of the execution of executive functions of the eThekwini municipality in dealing with the major issues around infrastructure that then lead to human developmental issues.
Appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Premier Candidate for KwaZulu-Natal. That is Chris Pappas.